The flowering and fruiting process of all plants in general, and not only just orchids, is probably one of the most important biological goals for the development and the existence of these plants. But what actually starts these processes is not fully known or understood. If people could control and trigger the flowering process, they could theoretically get up to several harvests a year, and then world hunger would disappear forever. Scientists have found a hormone-like protein called phloragen, which they claim is responsible for the onset of flowering and causes the meristemal cells of plants to divide and form peduncles and flowers. Let's see why such simple and beloved orchids do not want to bloom in our house. I'm going to dare myself today to try to answer this question. The first reason, and probably the most important, is as any living organism, they must reach maturity to begin reproduction. So orchids must accumulate biomass, and the age of the plant plays an important role. In addition, orchids need enough stored energy to bloom, and leaves and roots play a storage role in Phalaenopsis orchids, since all parts of the orchid participate in the process of photosynthesis. Therefore, for successful flowering, a harmonious balance between leaves and roots is needed. If something is not enough, if something is lacking, it will prevent flowering. The size and number of roots must match the size and number of leaves. It is believed that at least 3 leaves are needed for the formation of a peduncle. The second reason is for flowering, you need a trigger, some sort of stimulant. And scientists believe that the main trigger of flowering is photoperiodicity. That is a change in daylight hours, as well as a change in temperature and a change in the watering regime. In our houses, orchids exist in a relatively constant condition. And if your orchid is full of health and has excellent leaves and roots, but doesn't want to bloom, we have a video on our channel that I recommend you watch on how to make such an orchid bloom. The third reason may be that many believe the common tales that orchids can bloom continuously. Yes, the flowers in orchids may not wilt for up to 6 or even more months, and I can confirm this, but this is more like an exception than a rule, and it happens in the absence of pollination. If the orchid flowers are still being pollinated, they can soon dry up and fall off, which is also completely natural. After flowering, orchids, like all living things, need rest to regain a balanced biomass, for example. I cut these orchids in August for customers, and they rested for 3 months, and some of them, at the beginning of December, some of them began to release new flower stalks, or maybe even 2. And in February, they began to bloom. Remember, rest is really important. The fourth reason may be that sometimes a healthy-looking orchid may not bloom due to any hidden parasites. More often than not, it can be scale insects, sometimes spider mites, or any other parasites that are really difficult to notice. And they can suck the life out of the plant in just very little time until they finally destroy it. Keep a close eye on your orchids in case of an infection, and make sure to get rid of it immediately. We do have a video on our channel about scale insects. Ruthlessly get rid of the parasites before they get rid of your orchids, and then make sure they gain the biomass again. The fifth reason may be diseases, and the most often ones can be crown rot or root rot. A diseased plant will not bloom. And even if it falls ill during the flowering process, it'll certainly drop the already existing flowers due to the conservation of energy. It is necessary to take a number of measures to restore the health of the orchid and regain the biomass. Depending on the depth of the damage, this can take a long time because orchids are one of the slowest growing plants on the planet. If your healthy orchid is still not blooming and you've already reviewed reasons 1 and 2, then reason 6 may be that there is a mineral imbalance. And this is probably the most easily fixable one. The orchid needs to be fed either with a special synthetic fertilizer or even better, with urine. And the plant itself will capture and balance out the lack of either sodium, phosphorus, or potassium, and it will surely respond with lush flowering. Sometimes it is just enough to replace the substrate with fresh sphagnum moss, since microscopic particles of leaf litter can get stuck in the moss, which, while decomposing, can provide the orchid with all the nutrients it needs and can also help you achieve your desired result. And the seventh reason may be that modern varieties, such as Phalaenopsis orchids, are obtained as a result of serious interference with the normal genetics of plants, and obtained as a result of mutations and viruses and hybridization, as well as in pursuit of unusual colors and sizes, typically using radiation or chemical agents such as colchicine. This genetic set of chromosomes can increase several times and is called polyploidy, or it can decrease as well, for example, in these miniature orchids. I avoid buying these with all my might, even for sale, and I only buy them in the case of any special orders, since it is much more difficult to bring them to bloom than ordinary orchids. I advise, especially for beginners, to purchase simpler monochromatic orchids. They are usually the majority in the range, and they are more common, such as white, light, violet varieties, and then you can grow them with great success.